The next release we're going to be focusing on will be for the upper glutes and the outer glutes. Main reason these areas tend to be overcompensatory is just in general, think about from when we're sitting at that desk all day long and then we create these restrictions on the front side of the thigh. When we begin to kick backward, we're now going to develop overcompensations in the glutes that aren't necessarily functional. Since this is inhibiting the full contraction of our posterior chain, now the body's going to then have to create maladaptations to deal with the demand of having to move us in space as well as fighting the quadriceps on the front side as we take that step. So the whole idea is that if we get into some of these regions, that's going to help address some of the areas that are overly active in the hips, and that will hopefully help us create more functional tension on the glute max to create more drive. Now keep in mind, I say hopefully, mainly because myofascial releases won't actually correct these things. It's going to be more the corrective exercises that we do later on in this course that are really actually going to facilitate the change. The release is simply going to open up the capacity for us to unbind the areas that are dehydrated so we can ultimately get the ball rolling on being able to do the corrective exercises later that will help reassociate that tension better in that gluteus maximus and in the hamstrings and the other places that we're going to be working later on. So just think on a general basis that if you're still operating with the limited hip extension because there's a rectus fem impedance on the front side, when you walk, you're going to generally tend to have this hip hiking, this slight hip shifting excessively, and when you end up having that, you lose rotation in the body, and when you lose rotation, you end up getting these compensations in areas like the glutes. One more thing to keep in mind is that the IT bands directly tie into this gluteal region, and that's also going to be, like I said, when you have an inhibited, dehydrated IT band, that's also going to be inhibitory on the glutes. So just in general, it's going to be very important to create this hydration on that whole lateral side of the thigh, and part of that hydration is going to be right here on that outer portion of the glute. So what we're going to do is get on top of this medicine ball right here. We're going to just essentially just sit on top of it. Right here, I'm about at the lower ends of my glutes. But now what I'm going to focus on is getting into more of the upper ends of my glutes. I'm going to be rolling a little bit from about the mid portion up. I'm then going to cross my leg over, planting my weight down on this right shoulder here, making sure that I have good joint stacking over here, keeping a nice base of support that's soft through this elbow flexion that I'm doing. Then I'm going to bring this other hand over the top, and then I'm just going to roll and see if I can find some hot spots right here on this lateral portion of the glute. Okay, so what I like to do is actually strum my body in the frontal plane of motion back and forth like this until I find a hot spot. And then what I like to do is almost like roll up and down, just mainly because right now I'm getting into the gluteus medius fibers, which are more of those upper glutes. And then I'll end up typically finding a hot spot, and I'll kind of just go with the fibers of it. So this goes across the fibers, this goes with the fibers. If I want to, I can drop down on my elbow here. I can even bring my foot down in the way that I am, that way that I just did right now, and I can get onto that upper glute region as well. So if I really want to get high on the glutes, what I'll do is drop my elbow down, and then I'll bring this foot down. I could still bring the leg up, but then kind of balancing here becomes a little bit wishy-washy. What I would suggest is maybe just bringing both feet down, and then you can get into that upper gluteus medius region. Ideally also, you don't want to hit the hip bone here. If you go up high enough, you'll probably start hitting a little bit of your hip, maybe getting into your lower back. Be careful with that. We want to be just below the hip bone as we do the release work here. To get back to our original position, we'll be here, crossing the leg over. If you want to try getting into lower territories and you feel that it helps you, do it. By all means, nobody has biomechanics fully codified. I think I'm pretty far along the line compared to most in my field, but I don't have it fully codified, and so therefore, at some points, we have to rely upon our intuition to guide us to where we need to. The body is a very intelligent vessel if we give it the nurturing to guide us along this path of developing functionality. So sometimes if you feel like you do a release and then you get up and you feel substantially better, it feels easier to move, that should be the indicator to tell you, okay, then that's an area that I need to release. But if I'm going to operate scientifically, the way that I do, which I try and do on a multitude of levels, I'm going to be thinking about trying to get more to the upper glutes. I think there's a greater probability that if you get on this upper glute region, you're going to get much more benefit out of this particular technique. Okay? So do that, again, for anywhere between 2 to 5 minutes. If you need to do it for more time or even take breaks in between and come back to it, feel free to do that. But that's the gluteus maximus, gluteus minimus release. And let's move on to the next technique.